Well, hello and welcome to the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar, helping you live your best life. So on today's show, I've got expert John Ribeiro joining us. He is a performance coach. He's also co-host of a very popular podcast called Say Yes Podcast. Oftentimes we say no a lot, don't we? Well,
Yes.
can't live your best life if you keep on saying no to what shows up for you, right? He's also co-author of two internationally acclaimed books. One is called Zero to Hired, and we've got lots of
Mm.
great tips that we'll share today, and you'll learn some secrets, tools there to help you successfully break through the interview process. And also, the second book is called Canadian Job Search Guide for Professionals. You're going to learn
Mhm.
a lot of tools here today. So, how about we just jump into the conversation and say hello, John? It's so good to have you here today on the
Yeah.
platform.
No, thank you, Tanya. It's funny because I'm usually on the other side, right? I'm behind the mic doing the interviews, and it's so great to be here with you on the Mindset Mentor Show, just to share with your audience what we can talk about. We can talk about careers, we can talk about Ironman, we can talk about a bunch of different things. So we'll see where it goes.
I love it. I love it. Well, we love to have great organic conversations that take us in any direction because it's very indicative of life. You never
Mm,
know where you're going to end up, right? And it's so
yeah.
interesting because, I love the work that you're doing in helping people in a very stressful time. And that time is when you don't have a job. And there's so much fear and uncertainty that is linked to that. And that could be by choice, right? You've made a decision that you no longer want to maybe put up with this job environment, or it just doesn't align with who you are at this point in your life, or you've had an identity crisis, or somebody's pushed you out of that job, right? That happens
Mm,
often. And there's a lot of people who are left with that feeling of, oh my goodness, my now that I've lost my job, I've also lost my identity. And there's that
mm,
transition of now how to cope with all of that. So, I want to acknowledge you, first of all, for helping people in this time and putting together a structure to say, hey, wait a second, you can absolutely navigate this process. It's a process, and you will get through to the other side. So I'm curious, John, just like off the top, as to um what kind of was the catalyst for you? Did you actually experience that in your life?
yeah, it's funny you say that. Actually, so the whole book started from an experience that I went through in 2009. I worked for, what people may not know, I worked for a large telecom organization for almost 22 years myself.
Mm,
So within my role, I actually had my role eliminated a few times, depending on the different roles that I was in.
hmm.
One specific role was back in 2009. It was an interesting situation because we were told in March that we were all losing our jobs in September.
Ooh, okay.
So at the time, I was a manager of a team. I had 25, 30 people reporting into me. And I was given this news in March. I didn't tell my team up until April is when I announced to them, by the way, this is what's happening. This is what we're going to do. And
Hmm.
the one thing, I brought every person into the room one by one, giving them this news. And I said, look, the one thing I need from you is to show up 110% every day. If you're doing your job, I don't have to worry about you, and I can go look for opportunities for you.
Mm.
So what came from that is I sat every person down. I delivered a promise I didn't know how to deliver. You ever do one of those? Like
Oh yeah, get yourself
I
into a little
have,
bit of trouble.
I have no idea. But one thing I've learned over the last 2 years, it's not so much about the how, it is who you need to be in order to reach that how. So I made this promise. I had no idea how I was going to deliver on the promise, but I said, you show up 110%, I'm going to find you some opportunities and we'll get you ready. So what ended up happening is I brought everybody into the room one by one. We started doing interview prep, interview readiness for those opportunities that were going to show up. I personally started to reach out to people internally inside the organization. And I also started reaching externally to other organizations that were looking for people. So I said, hey, we've got, a bunch of qualified people. We'd love to send them your way. Sit down with them and give them an opportunity just to have a conversation with you. And what we found in 95% of those cases, the people that went out, they pretty much got a job interview, the job offer almost the same day after going through that interview. So there was something we were doing right. So we did a lot of preparation, we did resume reviews, we did prep coaching conversations before they went into those interviews. So all the best things came out. So what, through that whole 2009 experience, and in September, 100% of those people had placement.
Wow. Oh my God, that's
Right.
amazing. Yeah, because I mean
Yeah.
that's a lot of stress, and especially I would imagine for you being a manager and managing and feeling responsible for all of these people, that's so fulfilling to say, hey, look at this, we got them all, a placement. You can now relax because there's a trickle effect, right, to one
Mm-hmm.
person losing a job. So I can imagine that that was a big weight off of your shoulders as well.
Oh yeah. No, and what was beautiful is throughout this whole process, I never looked for work because this all stemmed from my director pulling me into a room and said, "Look, you look after your team, and I will guarantee you an opportunity. I won't guarantee you a job, but I'll guarantee you an opportunity." So he did his job, I did my job. And it was funny because I came out of this outsourcing exercise, this reorg, with two jobs, right? I ended up doing some consulting work for another organization, and I stayed internally in another role. So, it's funny because, the one thing, and this is for all the candidates that are listening out there right now, people are always watching, right? And what people were seeing was the success I was having with my team, right? Like the team showed up 110%. We were winning customer service awards, right? So in July of that year, my team won 3 out of 5 customer service awards for delivering amazing service to our client base.
Wow.
And they knew that they were all going to lose their jobs. And I remember standing on stage with the CTO at the time, presenting the awards to my team. And he just looks over, he's like, "How'd you do this? They're all leaving. You know that." I go, "I know, but you made a mistake." But, I kind of said that under my breath so he can hear me.
I love it. I love
But so when you're giving 110% in the worst of situations, what's it going to be like when you're in a good situation?
I love that so much because it's how you do one thing is how you do
How you
everything,
do everything.
right?
Yes.
And it's so indicative of really giving your best, and then the right things will show up. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
it's that energy that you're putting out there. Absolutely love that. And paying it forward. So what you just spoke about was such a clear example of being able to pay it forward, right? Knowing that, you wanted to empower your team. You empowered your team. You had somebody on your side working for you to empower
Yeah.
you. And again, that's that trickle effect. And when we really start to, be mindful of how we operate in the day to day, little things, it's incredible to see how they will manifest into something bigger and something that is going to lead you in a new direction. And in those moments where you feel like you have no direction, or you're in that situation where you don't have a job, it can be, stressful, but it's so important to really start to, work on your mindset, at least become aware of what is going on, behind the scenes, right? That negative loop sometimes can take over in our mindset, and it can really start to derail your success. And so I love what you shared with us because it's so clear that it was keeping that mindset strong and strengthened to
Mm-hmm.
be able to move forward, even though you can't see what is going on, right? But you had that
Yeah.
sort of inner knowing that, what, things will work out. So
Out.
how did that sort of show up for you in other ways in moving forward, and like that things will work out for you?
Yeah, well, so part of it's just having a faith and a belief. It's actually part of my mantra. This is funny that you say that. I have a belief that things will always work out. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I could be moving houses, I could be looking for new work. Like
Yeah.
things will always just work out. And just trusting that that's how things are going to show up. This is a mindset that I've been carrying actually even before 2009, when this whole situation happened.
Mm.
Um, just carrying the thought of things will always work out. And having that firm belief, like you just got to really sit with it and be patient, because what I think happens to a lot of people is they get caught in, this isn't happening fast enough, let me go
Mhm.
try something else. And if you do that, you're rushing a process that kind of needs to work on its own. My one of my other firm beliefs is the universe will always provide you what you're ready for. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a part of it is just being prepared for what's going to show up next. So, putting in the work, doing and taking action, which is, I think, the other big part of it, whether you're a job search, like you can think about job search all day long. You could be looking at job postings all day long. But if you don't take any action in applying for those jobs are never going to show up for you. It was like, the adage of, you can't win the lottery unless you play.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
gotta, you gotta play, right?
And that's so funny. It's interesting because I think we can, get stopped in the fear, right? And that leads to
Mm,
procrastination. And so, you have the intention maybe to look for a job. But then in your mind, it's like, well, it has to be perfect. And the resume has to be
yeah.
perfect. The job has to be perfect. But sometimes, you have to, get that imperfection to lead you to the perfection, right? To those perfect moments in life. And it's about taking a risk and moving and expanding beyond your comfort zone, because we can
Mm-hmm.
live in that comfort zone for a very long time and indefinitely, right? If we choose to. But nothing truly extraordinary ever happens in a comfort zone. It just
Mm.
doesn't, right? So it's so important to break that shell and, be okay with learning to be uncomfortable. And I look at my life, and it's funny because, you were saying that, if you had a job and sometimes something better will show up, the universe always has your back,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, is what you were saying.
Yeah.
You believe that all these great things will always happen to you, right? And I remember a time where I really wanted this job, and I auditioned for this job, and I thought, okay, this was really great. I thought I did very well, and I was really disappointed because I didn't get the job, right? But then it was interesting because then I learned it was about 6 months later, that job that I really wanted, that entire company went bust. Right. So I
Yeah.
would have been out of a job had I gotten that job. Right. 6 months later, I would again be in that same situation. And it turned out that I got another amazing job that led to so many wonderful opportunities, and is really, it was a huge catalyst to my career. And so it's interesting because I think sometimes in life, you're protected in those moments from what is not great for you, so that you can find what is that perfect fit for you wherever it is you are in your life, right? We attract the things that we resonate with, I believe, on a vibrational frequency as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to just know that sometimes when things don't work out the way you intended, oh, they're going to be so much better than you could have even imagined, right, John?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny you say that because there was years ago when I was in my role, I went for a job interview because I wasn't happy with my role. I was looking
Yeah.
for something different. And I interviewed with an outside organization and I didn't get the job. Like it was a great interview up until the end where I made my gravest mistake, right? And I said, okay, they're like, that question at the end of the interview. So do you have any questions for us? And I'm like, okay, I'm scrambling in my head. Okay, I'm just pulling something out of the air. I'm like, what do you guys do exactly? So that was it. That was the end of the interview, right? The
Oh
interviewer, she
boy.
looked at me and she's like, "For real? We've been talking for an hour. You know what we do?" I'm like, "Well, I kind of get an idea, but I don't know the specifics, right?" So it didn't. But that was fantastic, right? Because the lesson I took from that was, A, always be prepared with the response at the end. And, it led me down, and actually, it's in the book. It's in the book, how to successfully break through your zero to hire, how to successfully break through the interview process. I share that response in the book because
Mm,
it's one of those lessons where even when you don't think you have a question, there's a way to respond to that question. Because that's inevitably in every interview that, if it's a good interviewer and if it's a conversation that's going back and forth, they're going to ask you, do you have any questions for us? And
mm.
one of the things I coach and I train people on is always having a list of questions that they want to walk away with. Because as they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them, right?
Yep.
You want to make sure they have the right culture, you're the right fit, they have the right ideologies, the right values that align with what you have. When you think about their mission, vision, values system, does it align with who you are? And as you walk through the office, as everybody heads down, looking at their desks, if you have the opportunity to walk through an office now, or is everybody engaged in conversation? Is everybody chit-chatting? it gives you a lot of ideas of what culture starts to look like inside of a company. And the one thing that I'm finding that's even more important than the actual job, and in some cases pay, is the culture that the company has. Are you going to make your people work 60 hours a week, or is there a good life, work-life balance between home and work? Like, are those things there? And that's why it's important to have those questions as you walk into those interviews. Because you
Yeah.
want to set those expectations. Hey, should I be giving up my weekends? Am I going to carry a phone? Is the expectation that I answer it every time it rings after 5 o'clock? Like, don't get me wrong, there's situations where you're working on projects and there's deadlines and things like that. Those are the exception. That's not the norm. So
Yeah.
you want to understand what that is. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a great relationship, right? You
Mm-hmm.
need to have the values defined. If your core values are not aligned, that relationship is not really going to thrive. And you want to thrive in, any relationship, and including a work environment. That is a
Correct.
relationship. We spend a lot of time, at work, sometimes way more time, in a work environment versus our own families, right? So it's so
Mm-hmm.
important to get those the missions, values, and the vision defined, as you said, John. I love that mission, value, vision. And I might have got that mixed in the wrong order, but
It's all right. It's all good.
I love it. I love it. And also what I really loved that you spoke about, having those questions ready also for the interviewer, because I
Mm-hmm.
find that, just taking that action puts you in a powerful presence and a state, as opposed to feeling like the interviewer has all the power. It's that equilibrium. So there's a balance, right? It's a give and take. And that's important as well, so that we can feel confident going in there. Right? It's about having the confidence to be able to, deliver, and present yourself in the best possible light, but also to have an opportunity to share who you are, right? By asking those questions. Those questions can really lead and give the interviewer deep insight into your core being, I find. Right. So when you construct those questions, what are some of the key things, John, that we should be asking that would align, particularly with being able to define our mission, vision, and value?
Yeah, no. So I think a big part of it is, what are the expectations, right? From within this role, what are some of the daily expectations? Is,
Mm-hmm.
if we are being handed mobile devices, like if we're handed work phones, is
Mm-hmm.
the expectation that we keep those on us 24/7 and we answer every time it rings?
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So why else would they give you a phone? It's okay not to answer your phone after 5 p.m. if that's what the role is, right? So depending on the role, depending on the level that you're at.
Yeah.
So there's things like that. There's also things on, tell me a little bit about the work culture. What's maybe the biggest challenge you guys are facing right now in your department, that this role will solve for you? Because you also want to get insight in terms of how you're going to be able to solve problems for them in their role,
Mm-hmm.
right? As you're applying to these positions, the one thing I talk about all the time is, anytime you apply to a role, it's because you're solving a problem.
Yeah.
And you are the solution through your skills, your experience, and your knowledge, your background. That's what you're bringing into the role. If you know what the problem is, then you know how to be a solution to that problem. So one of the questions that I set my interviewers up with is this: if I were to be successful in this role, what would I have accomplished in the next 12 months? Right?
Excellent.
It does two things. One, it puts you in the place of the hiring manager's mind as you being the person successful in the role. And then they give you the top 3 priorities that they want solved in the role. So it's funny because I get my candidates come back and they like, they didn't know how to answer for the first 2 minutes. Like, they just looked at me like, wow, that was such a great question.
Mm.
But you want to ask that question because you want to place yourself as a successful candidate in that role. And you want to be, and they'll tell you, like, these are the top 3 things that we need done. You do these 3 things, you're going to be incredibly successful. Okay. Like, why guess what you need to do to be successful when you just can find out from the hiring manager themselves, right? Like, they
Yeah.
will tell you because they have a vision in terms of what they want the person in the role to do.
Yeah, and there's usually, that role model, within the company. So everybody knows, it could be like
Mhm.
hundreds of people, but there's always the top 1%, right, that are crushing it. And there's a formula. There is that formula. And so if we can know the formula, that's going to really set us up for success. Loving the conversation with my special guest today, John Ribeiro, here on Sauga 960. You're listening to The Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar, and we will be back helping you solve more problems after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar, helping you live your best life. And when we are in sort of a transition phase of our lives and we're maybe looking for a new job, or we're at a job maybe that we don't love, it's really hard to live
Mm.
your best life, right? So my special guest today is helping us to find a job that is going to align with our mission, our values, and our vision, but also arm you with the tools of how to actually apply for those jobs. How do you show
Mm.
up, right? Showing up as your best self. And listen, John, by the way, it's John Ribeiro. I
Yeah.
didn't say that. John Ribeiro is a performance coach. He's also a co-author of Zero to Hired and Canadian Job Search Guide for Professionals. So there's a lot of information and certainly a wealth of knowledge that you've amassed throughout your impressive career, John. And it's really arming people with the tools, right? I love that you helped your team. You spoke about this earlier.
Mhm.
Show up as their best selves, even though they knew they were, going to lose their jobs within
Mhm.
months. And just so important. And I love that scenario, because when we can really put our best selves forward, it's incredible how the universe just aligns with that, and more great things show up. The right people, the right opportunities,
Mhm.
and the right job, the right environment. Even though sometimes we're uncertain, if we stay positive, working on our mindset, we can eventually, things will work out. And I always say, life is a cycle, right? And it's going to evolve. Nothing lasts forever. So when you're not happy in that moment of, maybe you just got the announcement that you lost your job, maybe look at it in a different way. And I always remember one of my big mentors in life was Wayne Dyer. Love Wayne Dyer so
Mhm.
much. And he was doing a lot of radio interviews at the station. So, he knew a lot of the staff there. He was a regular. And he walked in one day and everybody was walking around looking miserable. And he started to ask people, like, what's going on? Like, why is everybody so miserable? And one of the guys said, well, we just lost our job. And the guy was, very upset about it. And so all Wayne Dyer kept doing was, every time he saw somebody, he would say, congratulations. So he would congratulate them because they just lost their job. And they're like, what are you talking about? Right. But he was like, because now something better is going to come in and something
Mhm.
better is going to show up. Right. So do you have that kind of response from people when they're in that situation of, losing their job and now they just don't know what to do?
Yeah, no, it definitely comes through in conversation that I have with some of the people that I work with, 100%. And it's like, what do I do now? And what's interesting is when you've been in a role for a really long time, your identity, your person becomes tied to that role in that organization.
Oh yeah.
And what I've seen with people is it actually takes you a little while to get out of that. Who am I, now that I'm no longer with a financial institution or a telecom or an IT company? It, like, your identity gets attached to it. So part of it is just knowing there's a mourning process that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer have this role. I'm no longer with this company, and that's okay. I'm still going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find is, when I'm working with those people, is they got to figure out who they are without this company behind them, especially if they've been like 2 decades with a company where they built themselves up, and they spend 60 hours a week putting in work and effort, supporting this organization. At some point they even feel let down. It's like, it's like a death. It's like a death in the family. I lost this and it's gone now. So part of it, just give yourself some space to say, you know what, it's okay. And the number two thing, and this is the one thing I'm always sharing with people, it's not personal. You know,
Oh, that's a big one because
yeah,
it feels personal, doesn't
it
it?
does. It totally feels personal, but it's not personal. And for anybody who has had a side hustle and working inside of an organization, I've always had a side hustle. It's funny because my parents, they were entrepreneurs, right? My dad had his own business, my mom worked with him. So I never knew anything else. Like I always saw the entrepreneurial side of things. It's like, okay, there's always a little bit of a hustle. You always have to put in that little extra work to keep your own business going. But when you work for a company, it's a little bit different. It's structured. You have your 9 to 5. You know what you need to do every day. So one of the things I did, and this is something that, anybody can kind of step into today, no matter where you're at, having a little bit of a side hustle actually gives you additional skills that you can bring into your role that can further your career.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I know a lot of people, and maybe organizations don't like to hear this side hustle. There are organizations that do embrace people that do have side hustles because it creates a better balance, right? Do a bit of what you love and what you need to do to get some compensation and receive some money for the work that you do every day. But
Yeah.
that side hustle, a lot of the skills you do there, you bring them back into your role unconsciously. So you don't even know that you're doing it. You do it anyways, and you become better in your role.
Yeah, and you can
So,
also become, much happier, right? If you
mhm.
have a side hustle that you love, right? If you don't 100% love your job environment, right? There's that again that balance.
Yeah, and what I find, people who typically do a side hustle, they do it because of the love for it.
Hmm.
They don't do it because of the money. At some point, the money shows up, and then that's when they leave their full-time thing to go do their side hustle because it compensates them well enough,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not trying to scare off any employer that's listening to this right now. Having people that have side hustles inside your organization is a good thing because
Hmm.
they're picking up so many additional skills that you couldn't necessarily train them for because you just don't create those opportunities for them to pick up those skills.
Yeah, that's an interesting, way to look at it because I never actually looked at it that way, right? The
Mm.
benefit to the employer of having a side hustle, right? That's actually really cool. I love that. So, the question that I'm thinking now, as you're talking about this and having a side hustle, and because sometimes those side hustles can actually lead to, and eventually, as you mentioned, like, a bigger business and maybe your full-time
Mm.
job now. So, how do you know, John, when it's time to maybe like sever the ties with, a job to build your own, to get
Mm.
into a startup environment, like, because startups, I think, are not for everybody, right? But they're
Correct.
certainly for a lot of people. And some people love the structure, like say a 9 to 5 environment. They don't want to do all of the thinking. They're busy with other stuff in life, right? So it's like they want to tap out. 5 o'clock, I'm done, right? And then there's other people who thrive on building something and who
Mm.
want their own business and want to put in all the work. But how do we know what direction we should take? When is it enough? When is it time to
Yeah.
leave that job?
It's a great question. I'm still trying to figure out that answer myself.
Yeah.
But the one thing I have heard and the one thing I've seen is you got to make sure financially you're in a good enough place that you can
Mm-hmm.
do that.
Mm.
Right. I think it comes down to finances, right? Like if you can still maintain everything you do on a day to day with your side hustle, then yeah, maybe it's time to separate from your full time thing. But here's the thing, and actually, I'm going to share this for people that do have side hustles today,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'll share a tactic that I use. One of the things as I was building up my speaker career, building up my trainer career, I used the organization to test out material inside my side hustle,
Ooh,
right?
nice.
I
Yeah.
know. So I would volunteer with like internal groups to put on talks and put on presentations,
Mhm.
run workshops, lead training sessions because those are skills that I wanted to personally build myself, but I didn't have an audience outside of work to do that. So what I would do is I would leverage these internal teams, these internal groups, and I would present to them, right? And say, hey, is there an opportunity for me to run a workshop? And if you can get 25, 30, or 50 people into a room, I would love to be able to present that to them. And nobody ever says no, it's internal. It's also, it helps you build up your profile and your influence inside of the organization. Because
Hmm.
people, I got to be known because I did inside of my organization, I did a lot of Toastmasters. I don't know if people are familiar with Toastmasters, public speaking clubs. So I did it under the banner of my Toastmaster club. So
Mhm.
when I would go out, I became the Toastmaster guy inside of the organization. And I would have VPs reaching out to me saying, hey, I've got a director on my team that needs to improve their public speaking and communication skills. Could they join your meetings? I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
Right.
please. Yeah.
Yes. So, one of the things I'm really big on is how do you find a place for yourself to build your influence, build your brand internally? And that was one of the ways that I did it. So I leveraged my side hustle. I got to build up all these additional skills, and I got to use the base, internally, because there was, inside of the organization in Ontario, there was like 15,000 people. And even getting 50 people into a room, that gave me a lot of room to play with just testing my material.
That is
Right.
great. I love that. I mean, that's a true entrepreneurial mindset right there, right? It's how to leverage that, but also to not only to leverage that so you're getting the benefit, but it's creating a win-win situation for everybody
Correct.
in that situation. And when you can create that win-win environment, I think that's so key, because I believe we should always, try to leave people with an impression of increase for having
Greece,
an
yes.
interaction with you, right? Instead of feeling, and we've all been there, where there's people who just seem to, suck the energy out of the room. Right? It's like, maybe they have the best intention, but it's like they incessantly talk about themselves and how, they can benefit. And I actually just recently had somebody reach out, it was called me, and it was like, okay, I was absolutely willing to help this person, but it was an interesting conversation because it was it was 100% one-sided, right?
Yeah.
So it's just, I believe that it feels much easier, let's say, to help people, when there's that a little bit of a balance, right?
Yes.
Because it's like in a relationship, if there's one partner who is constantly taking, and the other one is giving, at some point, it's not going to work. Right. I think everybody has a point, because then it's just, you're not empowering the person who's always taking to recognize that they also have to, be able to find that balance to give back, right? Because it's the law of, balance, that equilibrium, right? That give and take, that I think is important, and it's kind of a moment and an opportunity sometimes to recognize that. And listen, I've probably been there too. I'm sure I have been there when I've reached out to people sometimes, and certainly in the past, right, where you just don't even realize that you're creating that environment. That's why I think it's important to have awareness of our being and how we operate, right, and take stock at some of those conversations that we have, and really look at how to create a win-win situation.
Yeah. No, and it's applicable to interviews too, right? It's applicable to the job search process. How do I come from a place of service? Right? Because people will come in with, well, the job's for me, I need money. Listen, that's great. I'll be transparent here. Nobody cares that you need money, and nobody cares that you need a job.
Yep.
I want to know, as a hiring manager, how do you solve my problem on my team? And how does your skill set and your experience and your knowledge, become a value and an asset to me? So it's not about you. It's about how you can service me and my team and my department and my organization.
Yes.
But in the same breath, I also want to make sure that the organization's serving you in the way you need to be served as well. Right.
Yep.
So going back to the MVV, mission, vision, values, you want to make sure that they're aligned with who you are too. This way, when you show up every day, you feel like you're contributing to something. And, part of the things I'm passionate about is team culture. As a leader inside of an organization, I was always aware of creating the right environment for my people so people wouldn't want to leave. And it's funny because when people left, we celebrated people leaving the team to go to other roles, because in most cases they were growing internally, or they were going to bigger, better things. So we would celebrate that, right? And some people today, and I've heard it, saying, I'm leaving my role, my boss isn't happy, he's making it really difficult for me. Why? It means you've done a great job as a leader, right? When you grow, my firm belief as a leader is my belief is that my role as a leader is to help people grow and become the next best version of themselves.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right.
I love that. I love that. It's funny because, as you were talking about that, and it's like, so, when the boss hears that you're leaving and then they're not happy, that means that they took it personally when they're not happy for you, right? So
It's
important.
not personal, right?
It's not personal. It always feels personal, but it really is not personal, right? It isn't. And
Correct.
I think that's really key. And that's hard sometimes to help people to make that shift, but it can happen on both sides and clearly, right? But
Mhm.
leadership is so essential, being an effective leader. And I think the days of dictatorship, right, in leadership is completely gone. That's not what the world needs. That's not what your employees need. They want to be empowered to become leaders. And I love that. Somebody had said, the best leaders are the people who can create the most leaders.
Correct. No, 100%. I'm with you. And this is something I learned from Robin Sharma years ago, one of my favorite authors in the space, and Canadian, by the way, which I love, right?
The
Because,
monk who sold his Ferrari. Yes.
yeah, the monk who sold his Ferrari.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yeah, being in a place of service. And, I had to go through the tough lessons myself, right? Like my dad was an entrepreneur. So, being the son of an entrepreneur who had his own business, by default, I was living, I was his right hand person inside of his business. And I remember at the age of 17, he went away for a month and I was in charge of running everything, right? The operations, looking after the team and looking after invoicing, like you name it, everything, right? And I had to learn very quickly that if you don't get people on the right side where they want to come in and show up and do the work, they just don't come in. you know and it's funny when I hear people say, my team doesn't want to come into work. I automatically I start to think about what's the culture like, right? How are you supporting them? Like if somebody feels like they got to call in sick every other day because they're not liking what they do, the problem isn't necessarily with them, the problem's with you.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
that's a
I know that's going to hit some people hard, and that's okay because if people aren't showing up, it's not about them. Because the first thing we do is we complain about team members and how everybody's lazy today and nobody wants to do the work. That's not true. We just haven't created the right environment and space for them to thrive.
Yeah. And I think that's so key because if you can jump out of bed and be excited about going to your place of business, whether you're working for someone or it's your own business, that is just a wonderful feeling. Too many people I think wake up feeling like, oh my gosh, snooze button. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to have to do again the same routine that I did yesterday, go into a job that they don't like because
Mhm.
it's really not fulfilling. And I think that the culture, the society is now much more mindful and conscious of having meaningful work. And you said earlier the word contribution, and I think
Mhm.
that is essential to living a great life, is contributing. And that is also contributing to your best self, right, in an environment. And if you're not loving the job that you have, just love what you do, love what you do. And
Mhm.
eventually that can change into something else, right? Because we're not going to always love everything 100% in life. That's just not how life works, right? We're thrown some curveballs, some challenging moments that may not be your first choice, but if we can learn to sort of just flow with them instead of the resistance hitting that wall constantly, it's really incredible to see, what can show up, right, when we feel like we are fulfilled, even though we may not love that moment. If we give it our best, there's that feeling of contribution and that meaningfulness, like making a difference and serving humanity. I
Mhm.
love that you said that that's one of the things that is important to you. How may I serve? And that's something that I often will say to myself, how can I serve? Who can I serve? And what would you have me say? These are questions that I will ask because it's just also conditioning the mindset that's important, right? Instead
Yeah.
of some of the negative talk. And listen, I've been there too. I mean, this is why I teach people, how to reprogram their mindset, because my mindset was awful, right? Like way back when, oh my gosh, I was full of like limiting beliefs and, oh, people are out to get me. And, life is hard, like all these things, right? And the feeling of unworthiness. And when
Mhm.
we can start to change that mindset, we can really start to, create a life that sort of just drops in, right? Do you know what I mean but when
Yeah.
I say that, John? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and you know, where your focus goes is where you end up going too, right? So if you think the world is a horrible place, well, guess what's going to show up for you?
You got
All
it.
these horrible things, right? So it's really about keeping, you know, Tony Robbins has a line, energy goes where focus goes, or focus goes where energy flows where focus goes. So it really comes down to perspective and what you're looking at and how you see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can look at, there's two sides to every coin, right? And you can look at something and say, wow, this is the best thing in the world, or this is the worst thing in the world. And you're both right.
Yep.
Everything's good and bad. So it comes down to, you know, your perspective of what you bring to it. And that determines how you show up every day. So even though you don't necessarily love your job, the one thing that you can bring is a good attitude to it, because
Oh
that'll
yeah.
create more opportunities for you. Say yes to the challenges. Say yes to, listen, even my career, I said yes to roles I had no idea on how to do. You know, I'm sure you've been there too. It's like, okay, I got no clue what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to figure it out and, you know, get through it. And
Yep,
you pick
absolutely.
up those skills, right? So for those that are inside of companies today, when you get asked to volunteer for something, instead of saying that's not my job, because that's what we'll hear from people,
Wow.
jump into it, say yes. And, you know, that's why I call it the Say Yes podcast. Say yes, get into those places where you feel uncomfortable, because it'll give you that space to grow and pick up new additional skills that you could use for another role in the future.
Yes, yes, yes. Say yes, you got it. I love that. And because you never know what's going to show up or who you're going to meet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's incredible. So that connection is so important. So just, take that chance and say yes. Well, we're going to take a break and we'll be back here with more on the Mindset Mentor with my special guest, John Ribeiro, peak performance coach and author of Zero to Hired, and also Canadian Job Search Guide for Professionals when we come back next. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Mindset Mentor. I'm Tania Kolar, helping you live your best life. And so, I want you to take a moment to really delve into how you're feeling right now in this moment. Are you excited about your day? Are you excited about life? Are you excited about tomorrow? Or are you feeling stuck? Are you feeling challenged in life? Because here's the thing is that we always have a choice, right? No matter where we are and what we're dealing with, and life can really throw us some really difficult moments that we have to, navigate through. But I want you to always remember that you can navigate your greatest challenges. You will get through to the other side. Okay. So it's so important for conversations like this to happen on the Mindset Mentor so that you know that you are not alone. And my special guest today is John Ribeiro. John is a performance coach. He helps people navigate a very stressful time in their lives. And that is, maybe not having a job, and for whatever reason, right? Obviously, income is important, right? In order to live our best lives, we don't want to have financial stress and strain that can also lead to relationship stress and strain, and all kinds of other issues, or, losing your home because no longer have that income that you were used to, or not being able to afford the home that you want, or the things that you want, or to do the things that you want. So, it's really important to know that you will get through whatever experience you are going through. And John, thank you for sharing some great tools and tips and wisdom from the years of helping people, navigate, and helping teams navigate, challenges, and maybe finding new work. So I love this conversation. There's so much to be gained and so much insight. And I know that you have really worked on your own personal mindset for quite some time, so that really arms you with helping people. So let's talk about one of your latest endeavors that you really
Mm.
used a lot of those principles that you teach into taking your life to another level.
Yeah, no, thank you. Great question. So I'm going to share with your audience. So recently, I did an Ironman 70.3. And for those that don't know what that is, an Ironman 70.3 is a 2 kilometer swim, 90K bike ride, and a half marathon. So a 21.1K run. And I figured this year, at the end of last year, I wanted to do something big, right? I wanted to challenge myself. And as for those that are listening right now, if you're going through that job search process and you're thinking, now is time for a shift, here's my invitation for you. Go do something different. Push yourself, because it raises a level of confidence in you that I can almost guarantee you didn't even know existed. So I jumped into this Ironman 70.3 to really push myself mentally and physically. Because what I learned through that event was, yes, 50% of it is preparing yourself physically for it, but the other 50% was all mindset. Mm-hmm. And it's the same mindset tools that I teach people when they're going through their job search process. Because there's going to be moments where you're going to feel like you're climbing up a hill, you're at 80 kilometers, and you got this big hill in front of you, and you're like, I just want to give up and I want to stop. Right. And, maybe that's not the case, for you as you're going through that process. But, one of the things I've seen for people who are going through a job search, it's a nice sunny day outside. I'm not going to put that resume in. I'll do that tomorrow. Right. So the moments where you want to give up, and here's something that I learned and I actually took with me on the road when I did the event, was, step into a moment of gratitude. Like, you get to do this. You get to be in this process right now, and you get to explore things that you didn't even know existed. And what I find is when you step into that gratitude, that moment to say, you know what, I'm here. Yes, it's difficult, it's challenging, it's tough, but I can do this. I've done it in the past. And if you look back and you think about your life and all the hard things that you've gone through, especially because I work with a lot of newcomers to Canada, so they're making that transition from one country to another. The one thing I kind of invite them to step into is just be grateful that you get to do this, right? You get to do this for yourself. You get to do this for your family. You get to do this for the next generation. And when you step into that, it's like, okay, so maybe it's not that tough. Right. And you really get to just kind of step into it and say, yes, I got this. We talked about, your mindset is 50% of your job search. Right. Actually, your job search is a combination of three things. But the three biggest things is, number one is your resume and applying for work. The other part is networking, connecting with people. And the third part is the mindset that you bring into it. Mm-hmm. And when you think of from a mindset perspective, you got to be resilient. You got to be strong, and you got to do whatever it takes to get yourself to where you want to be. And some people say, well, it's too difficult, so they give up, right? And they stop doing that job search. And my invitation to you is, don't stop, keep going. And no matter how tough it is, just like when I was doing that event, listen, running 21 kilometers after cycling 90K and swimming 2K, I wanted to quit. And, I was ready to, I could make a speech out of anything at this point, right? Like, I've done enough talking, I can turn anything into a speech. I can make a speech about not completing the Ironman, right? But, the one thing that also kept me going was community. Right. And the one thing I'm going to invite you to think about is think about people that can support you through this process. This is why I talk about networking being one of those key components when it comes to job search. Find people around you that support you, because those are the people who are going to cheer you on. Those are the people who are going to get excited when you get that interview, when you first get that call for that interview, when the recruiter reaches out to you. And who knows, they might be able to connect you with somebody that's looking for your specific skills and talent. You being the solution to their challenge that they're facing right now. Mm-hmm. Let people know, because what I find is people hide themselves, and they're almost embarrassed to tell people that they're actively looking for work.
Yeah. Well, I think there's sometimes people feel judged, right? Mm-hmm. Especially if their lack of a job was not their choice, right? And Correct. So they don't want to share that, but they don't realize that so many people have also gone through that experience, right? So, I would even encourage people, read a book on, somebody who's a role model to you. And it's interesting to see, biographies are great because you'll see the transition of where people started. And, nobody in life, has that greatest job from the get-go. It takes some work, right? To build it, to find it, and to go through our life experiences to make us the person that we are, to really to define that and to feel good about that. You got to stretch and go beyond your comfort zone and take action, to get out there and take action, and don't give up. Like John Ribeiro, my special guest, has said to everyone, don't give up, keep going. You can also be your own Ironman, right? Because life is kind of like a running Ironman every day sometimes, right?
Yeah, well, then you cross the finish and it's like, yes.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, that's the best part. And getting that job is like crossing the finish line at an Ironman, right? It's like, you know, all the hard work, all the time and effort that you put into it eventually pays off, right? But you
Yeah.
got to stretch yourself. You got to put in that work. You got to put in that effort. You got to treat your job search like a job,
Mm,
right? So if you're doing like 5-10 minutes a day, well, guess what? You're not going to get the results. It's like, you know, trying to train for a half marathon, only doing like 100-kilometer walk every day.
yeah.
Like you're not going to get to the finish. Or if you do get to the finish, it's not going to look pretty, right? And it's not going to be the way you want it to look, right?
Yeah. You
So put
want to
in
set
that
yourself
work.
up for success, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you want to set yourself up for success. You want to put the work in ahead of time. This way, when you get there, you're ready for it and you're ready to go, right? So,
And you want
yeah,
to
no, just,
pat
yeah,
yourself on the back as well. And unfortunately, we are out of time, right? So I want to say thank you so much, John Ribeiro. It was great having you here on the Mindset Mentor and sharing your peak performance tips to help us find that right job or just even feel good in the job environment they are, and to have the hope that there is opportunity available when we stretch ourselves.
yes. No, and thank you for having me. This has been an honor and a privilege. So, thank you.
Oh, I love the conversation. Thank you. All right, everyone. That is a wrap for today's Mindset Mentor. Make sure you tune in Thursdays at 3 p.m. for more of a mindset workout. So remember, your mindset is like a muscle that needs to be strengthened and conditioned. So keep at it. Do not give up. You've got this.